Today's show is being brought to you by individual contributors through Patreon. Go to patreon.com/ the education game to help support the show. And thanks. So, Matt, today we're going to talk about reading and what you can do with your kids at the house around reading. And you're going to take a special focus on some self-control issues,
Yep,
right?
that's right. That's right. That'll be today's show.
Awesome. Welcome to the Education Game podcast. I'm Scott.
Some call him the White Shadow. I call him that.
And
Oh,
who are you?
that's right. I forgot my cue. And I'm Matt Barnes.
And some call him, okay, we're going to test this out, the Brown Hornet.
You have to say it like this, though, Scott. The Brown Hornet.
The Brown Hornet.
Perfect. Perfect.
And this is the spot for parents who are looking for something much better in their child's education. It is high time for parents to get better at navigating, advocating, and negotiating a better learning journey for their child. So let's get started.
All right, let's do it. The Brown Hornet is
So,
ready.
so what about this issue of self-control, Matt? How does
Yeah.
that connect with reading?
Yeah. So, the blog I wrote this week, it starts with this. Scott, it starts with a situation where I'm in the grocery store, and there's a kid that comes tearing down one of the aisles, and he's got a sausage in his hand. It's almost like he's carrying it like a football, and he's just running. He's looking like back in the day, some of the big time, Walter Payton, smiling, having a good old time. But of course, mom is right behind him, right, trying to grab him. And so it got me thinking about this whole role of self-control in how we teach it, the value and the importance of it, particularly as it relates to reading, because everything that I've experienced is that if you are a young person that has not developed some sense of self-control, then reading becomes this very difficult thing for you to do. It's like pulling teeth, right?
Yeah.
So that whole interaction with the kid in the grocery store, and we see it all the time, right? Kids who are just going buck wild in the grocery store. The issue is, what it reminded me of was an interaction I had with a woman who coached me on how do you teach self-control to a child. And the way she did it blended reading and self-control. And she called it something called sit time, SIT time. Have we talked about that before, Scott?
No.
No, I
No.
haven't.
Tell me more.
Oh, it is absolute genius. And if there's one thing that I'm going to recommend that a parent does, whatever the grammar is there, it's to do this sit time with regularity. And so here's how it works. So and this starts early, by the way. It can start like with an 18-month-old. You sit the child in on a usually like a towel or some sort of like relatively small sitting area, and you have a timer and a book, and those are the three elements: a towel, a timer, and a book. You set the child there, you put the book in front of them, you set the timer for, if it's a small child, you set it for 15 seconds. And if you're mom or dad, you sit next to him and you say, it's time for sit time. You set the timer, you look at your book. If the child tries to walk away, you actually grab him, because 18 months you can grab him, put him back down. And
Hmm.
as the timer rings, you say,
It's kind of
great
hard to do
job.
that with an 18-year-old.
It's a
So it's
little
good you're
harder.
starting with an 18-month.
It's a little harder, but it's possible. You just have to use weapons and chains and things like that. It's a little more complicated. But the point is, it's a
Careful
progressive.
now, Brown Hornet.
That's right. No kidding. The point is that you start super small, and you're starting to teach the child to sit with the book. You reward them after they get done for that 15 seconds. But if you do that every day, maybe twice a day, over time you start to increase the amount of the sit time, and the child starts to get comfortable sitting on that pallet with one book. To the point, there's a woman I worked with 6 months ago. She's got a 2-year-old. Well, now he's 2. But she approached me about it. And I'm like, look, you got another child coming. You got to get ready. And the way you get ready
Yeah.
is you make sure that 2-year-old can handle himself for some period of time while you're changed. Well, while you're going to change the other child. Anyway, long story short, that child is now able to sit for 15 minutes at 2 years old while mom is handling something else. Again, not out of sight, but mom may be changing a diaper, cooking, whatever it may be. And that is sit time. You slowly increase the amount of time, and over time, the child gets more and more comfortable managing themselves. And now the book is in front of them. They're going to start to read that book. Initially, they just play with it. Initially, they may ignore it. But at some point, as they're sitting there, they start to pick it up and look through it. It is a almost completely frictionless way of teaching self-control and reading at the same time, and it is absolute genius.
Did you do this with your kids?
I did. I did.
Yeah.
In the blog post, the way it happened was I met them at the airport. I was flying through. It was when I was on the board of Truman University. I was flying up. These are friends from college. I said, "Hey, let's meet up on my this was back when you had you could leave the airport and come back without much difficulty. But
Yeah.
I had a connecting flight, and so I met them. I was disappointed that they brought their kids, but once I saw how well their kids were behaved, like their kids were just completely self-controlled for an hour. My friends and I had a conversation where these 5, 4, and 2 year olds were sitting at another table, Scott. They were sitting at a different table in a coffee shop, completely managing themselves. 2 were reading, 1 was coloring. And they had been trained in this mantra. And when I got done with the meeting, I'm like, look, girlfriend, you got to tell me what the heck you did to these kids. Because these kids
Yeah.
are so well behaved, so self controlled. How did you do it? And she said, hey, it's practice. And the way you practice is with sit time. Every day or twice a day, you're training them how to sit with a book so that they can learn how to control themselves. And then reading, of course, explodes once a child is sitting there. It's amazing, Scott. I've seen it happen
Yeah.
and work so many times. And
Did
for
you
us,
did you did you have struggle with that with any
yes.
of your kids?
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, it's
Can you speak to that?
sure, sure. So my
Yeah.
middle daughter is the one that probably, had she been in a typical school, she probably would have been labeled ADHD.
Mm-hmm.
But what all that means is she just had more energy. But
Mm-hmm.
my son, who's oldest, he took to this easier, right? It wasn't easy, but we started 15 seconds and then went to 20 seconds and then 25, 30, etc. By the time my middle daughter came around, she was having a harder time with it. So for her, we had to back it up and just go slower. But but she got there. By the age of 18 months, she was sitting for 15 minutes. And then my third child, who watched her brother and sister, it was a heck of a lot easier for her because she just like, okay, that's what we do in this house, and she just followed along in their wake. But the issue is that it requires a long term mindset. You have to be thinking about, where do I want this child to be 2, 3, 4 months from now, and then work towards it. Most of the families that I've worked with on this, the biggest challenge to this is that they're impatient. They want the child
Yeah.
to day 3 sit for 5 minutes. Not possible. Five
Yeah.
minutes, maybe a month away.
What do you talk about baby steps,
It's all
right?
about baby steps. That's right. That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. And this makes so much sense to me as a uh, sort of a school-based educator for so many years
Mm-hmm.
because parents, like teachers, oftentimes want to skip to what we call the summative goal. And the summative goal is what you just alluded to. I want my kid to be able to sit down on the couch and read a book
Right.
for 30 minutes.
Right.
And what they lose sight of is something that we call in the education business formative goals,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that is, in order to get to the summative, you must go through the formative.
Interesting.
And, we're always about sports analogies.
Mm-hmm.
Think about this. So I'm your coach, and I tell you, Matt, I want you to go out and shoot free throws, and I want you to hit 48 out of 50 of them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And you've never shot a free throw a day in your life.
Right.
Now, I'm going to guess that that summative goal is not going to be reachable for you unless you break that goal down. We break that goal down, right?
That's right.
You as the performer, myself as the coach,
That's right.
into what you call and what we call baby steps,
That's right.
right?
Yep. Yep.
So it's so important, whether it's shooting free throws or building strong readers.
That's right.
We will all want all learners to reach the summative goal. But for almost all of us, the summative goal is based upon formative goals.
That's right. That's right. And so that reminds me, Scott. Remember when everyone went home last fall? I'm sorry, last spring
Yeah,
because of COVID,
yeah,
and immediately there was this expectation that the child should be able to sit at home and do 7 hours of homework on a computer. Uh, you remember that? And parents were freaking out, and schools were like, just don't worry about it. Then in the fall, the same thing happened again. The school said, okay, we're going to start school normal. Kids are going to, sit and do 7 hours of work. But no one ever said to the child two things. Well, no one ever asked the child what they wanted, right? That's a whole conversation of itself. But then no one ever said, okay, we're going to practice some of the skills that are going to be required in order to even consider sitting in front of a computer for some period of time. So if you don't practice it and then you create these expectations that are unrealistic, all it leads to is frustration. Frustrations on the part of the teacher, on the part of the child, on the part of the parent. So I really was critical of schools saying we're just going to open it up and expect people to sit in front of a computer without at least beginning the process of teaching them in small steps how to do that.
yeah. You have to build capacity. So this is called this sit
Sit time. Got it. You got
sit
to
time.
enunciate, Scott.
Sit
Sit.
time.
That's right. Be careful.
Yeah. Okay.
But again, last point about it is if you have a young child and you're going to try to teach them this, reach out to me. I'd love to talk to you about it because there's a whole bunch of small strategies and where you do it and how you do it that I'd love to talk to you about more. Some of it will
Yeah.
be in the blog that'll be released on the 26th of January. But yeah, send me a note at The Education Game, Matt at theeducationgame.com, or go to our website at The Education Game and schedule a one-on-one conversation with one of us, and we'll talk through it. So
Yeah. So Matt, you're I think you're talking to parents about the how-tos, how the sort of the context of reading. I'm going to talk just a little bit with you and to parents about the what's of reading.
hmm.
So I ran across a an interesting book. We're not really promoting this, but I'm just sharing this because I've found it to be very straightforward, very understandable. It's written by two editors of the New York Times Book Review, and it's all about how you raise a reader
You haven't said the name. What's the
and
name of the book, Scott?
how to raise a reader.
Oh, maybe you
Oh,
did
you
say that.
did? Yeah, I did.
Excellent.
Um, so I just kind of want to. I'm not going to, read the book, but I wanted to just kind of take parents through the uh, the table of contents,
Mm-hmm.
um, and where I picked up on the story because we don't really deal with newborns. I picked up on the story around growing a reader.
Ah,
But there's an excellent section for new parents
yeah,
on what to do with newborns around reading, much to what you talked about, and that is there are some skills that you can start working on even before the young child, if not the baby, starts to show their own prowess
yeah.
around this skill.
Scott,
But
yeah.
yeah,
Are you gonna go through any specifics?
well, I'm just going to talk a little bit about um, uh,
Oh, the table of
one of
contents.
Yeah, one of the things that the authors talk about is uh, you have to break down the emerging reader into two levels, or how to grow a reader. So the two levels are the emerging reader
Mm-hmm.
and the independent reader.
Mm-hmm.
And so, one of the mistakes that we've just alluded to is I think parents try to get to that independent reader
Yes.
status without supporting the emerging reader.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so that's a big point that's made in this book. Um, Pay particular attention to 11, 12, 13 years of age
Why?
because, according to the authors, uh, reading for most of those kids move from enjoyment to more technical,
Ah,
whether it be
yes.
science or history, right?
Yep.
And so it can become a challenge,
Yes.
much more than just reading fiction,
Right.
right?
Right.
And so they've got an entire section on 11, 12, 13. They call it middle school. But
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to say, usually when your kid gets around, 10 to 14, that's the time to, even if they are a so called independent reader, you might want to revert back to some of the practices that you underwent when they were an emerging reader
Mm-hmm.
because they're reading different materials,
Right.
right?
Right.
Yeah,
Right. Well, I guess the other thing, Scott. I mean, you were middle school principal for a time. I've heard and seen with a lot of families I've worked with that kids will enter middle school, um, but their reading level is actually in early elementary school, third grade,
right,
right?
right.
And so not only are they moving from books that are more fun, but they're moving to books that are more technical and have a more challenging, uh, you know, um, uh, vocabulary. And so it's a double whammy for those kids, right? Have you seen that in the middle school world where they come in middle school and they're really not ready to read those books?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's one of the I think limitations of traditional school,
Mm.
and one of the liberations if you can take your learner outside of traditional school.
Mm.
Uh, and let me tell you why. Uh, I've seen few traditional school settings that work on reading as much as some of these kids need to work on reading.
Ah, yes, yes,
And so what happens is it's almost like we start piling on the weak reader, right?
yes. That's right.
Instead of fixing reading, we just start piling on
Yes.
more and more reading. They don't have the requisite skills. And I'm up in Vermont now, but you and I know that HISD has a big reading problem,
Mm.
and
Huge,
Houston
huge.
is across the city. And one of my ideas was let's take a big time out. Let's set up reading academies in all
Yes,
schools.
yes.
Take those kids into those academies, into those think tanks. Get their reading abilities where they feel proud of being a reader,
Right,
and then let's put them back into the traditional setting.
right.
But that hasn't happened yet, Matt.
Well, Scott, yeah, we've talked about this, and that idea just seems so obvious, Scott, what you just described. I mean, if the child is not reading, you've lost, right? They are in deep trouble. And so, the language I use coming from the healthcare world is if a child is not reading, that it's like that child has cancer, right? And it's going to metastasize if you don't get serious about dealing with that cancer.
Yeah,
And it's hard for me to even get my head around the idea that 1 out of 10 black boys are reading on grade level in third grade. It's hard for me to even understand how that's possible. But then they move up to the middle school, and it's probably not much better. And at no point does anyone say, "Hey, you know what? If we don't deal with this cancer in this kid, that cancer is going to metastasize, and that's going to lead to early death, or certainly some sort of
Yeah.
dysfunction, which is what we see
Yeah.
with a lot of black boys. So
I'll give
it's
you
yeah.
yeah, I'll give you a even a more morbid example of
Good. Let's keep this
weak
show.
reading.
Let's keep the show
Yeah,
morbid.
exactly. Maybe I should put my hood up, But no, you know this
Your black hood,
because
not the white
now
hood.
we've talked about this before, and that is so when corporations start building prisons,
Oh yeah.
one of the data points they take a look at is primarily African American males and what their reading ability is at the third grade.
Yeah.
Our country is actually building prisons
Yeah. Lots
based
of
upon
prisons.
African American males' inability to read.
Right. Yeah. 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 Most and the data bears this out. I can't remember the percentages, but it's well north of 50% of the kids of the young men in prison
Yeah.
can't read. I think it
So,
maybe as
so
high
can
as
I
eighty
can I
something.
give parents just a quick primer
Sure.
on some things
Yeah.
to be
Please.
thinking about as they're working on reading? Um, and like I said, I think you did a really good job of how to. This is more about the what. But Matt and I talk a lot about goals, and that every learning plan needs to have goals.
Mm-hmm.
And reading is no different than any other pursuit. You need to establish some goals. But one of the things in the learning business that we believe in is how you scaffold a goal.
Yeah.
And what I mean by scaffolding is, a young reader, they're not going to read at the level, or they're not going to read the interest at 11 years old that they might be at 7 years old, right?
Mm-hmm.
So here I wanted to offer the parents just some examples of some reading goals.
Awesome.
So for early learners, one of the things we're going to talk about is vocabulary development.
Mm-hmm.
Every strong reader has a really strong vocabulary. And so here's an example for an early learner of a reading goal. By Friday, Sam will be able to identify 25 words from his current Magic Treehouse book.
I
Okay,
love
so
Magic
that's
Treehouse.
totally okay for parents to establish that type of goal. Like I said, this is all about vocabulary development, but it's vocabulary development doing it within the context of something that the kid really likes to read.
So it's not just
Uh,
random words pulled out of the dictionary. There's books. There are words that come out of a book that the child enjoys. That's the
yeah.
yeah yeah yeah.
So in the business, we call that learner context, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So the reason why you're motivated to learn that language is you really like that series of books,
Right,
right?
right.
Here's one for developing learners. So these
Okay,
are kids just a tad bit older, maybe,
there you go.
or tad bit farther along the line on the development continuum.
Yep.
Doesn't have to be connected to age. But here's one for a developing learner.
Mm-hmm.
By Friday, Neil will finish his spy school book and be able to answer a set of comprehension questions correctly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And a neat little addition to that is about halfway through that spy school book, a parent asked Neil some questions that he might want to ask himself,
Yes,
right?
yes.
So that, yeah, so all readers have strong what we call predictive capabilities.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
Yeah,
So what's going to happen
and
next? What would you do if you were in this situation? What do
exactly,
you? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that.
that's right, that's right,
And that's
that's
something
right.
else, Scott. Just what you're doing here is you're coaching parents on how to do this themselves, right? So that's I really appreciate you, letting parents know more about the business of education. So continue,
Yeah.
Dr. Scott.
Well, there's really there's really no magic to this, right?
Yeah.
So whether it's the parent or the teacher, because I would make the argument that before there was a classroom teacher, there was a teacher at home.
That's right.
and that's called mom or dad or aunt, uncle,
Mm-hmm.
grandma,
Mm-hmm.
grandpa,
Yep.
right? Here's a goal for advanced learners.
Okay.
Same goal around reading comprehension, but now by Friday, Helen will finish Wuthering Heights.
Mm-hmm.
And so, the other thing that you can do with reading is that once, at least around reading comprehension, the reader has good answers at that level of reading or that level of book, take the level up a bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're
Mm-hmm.
still working on reading comprehension, right? Whether they're understanding, but the nuances really increase with the more advanced the reader moves along the continuum.
Yeah.
Um, let's talk a little bit about examples of reading development activities. So I think that there are probably five.
Okay.
um, so, so one, we get this question a lot. So, what should I focus on? Should I focus on phonics or whole
Mm.
language,
Yeah.
right? And actually, the answer, Matt, is both,
Right.
right?
Right.
So,
Right.
we want readers to have strong phonemic awareness. So that is basically how they're going to start with the alphabet. They're going to sound out their letters. They're going to start working on combinations of
Mm-hmm.
consonants and vowels, trying to
Blends.
figure out the English language.
Yep.
That's all phonemic awareness. At the same time, you can start working with your kids on vocabulary development.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And this can be made into a very, simple and enjoyable game. I'm going to show you 10 words. We're going to see how many you can get correct.
Yeah. And so
And then the next night, I'm going to show you the same 10 words. Let's see if we can take it from 6 out of 10 to 8 out of 10 or 9 out of 10.
yeah, but
Right?
Scott, let me pause you for a second, Scott, because there's
Yeah.
this raging debate, you know about it in education circles around is it phonics or is it whole word, whole language? Is that what it's called?
Whole language.
Whole
Yeah.
language, yeah. And whole language is again recognizing a word on sight. Phonics is being
Yeah.
able to sound it.
Through the practice of reading.
Right. And phonics is
Right.
actually sounding it out.
Yeah.
I have learned or noticed in a lot of the families I work with, they defer to the whole language as if the child should have to memorize every word they see. They don't understand phonics. They don't understand that
Mm.
there are certain ways that letters make produce sounds, and so my experience is that the phonics is the thing that most families need to become better schooled at.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if that's just
Yeah.
because they were taught in a
Well, you have
different
to
way or
put
what.
in the work, right?
Yeah,
In terms of baby steps,
yeah,
walking before you run,
yeah, yeah,
right? So I think phonics provides all of that.
yeah. Okay, so that
Phonics, yeah. So a lot of phonics work. You're going to have to be creative parents to figure out some fun games to play with your kids around phonics because phonics can be, really struggling
yeah, it can
and
be
sometimes, if you're
challenging.
not careful, boring work.
Sure.
Right?
But there's a
Yeah.
bunch of stuff online now about sounding out words that is just so much more available than it was when I was raising my
Yeah.
kids. So that's
Yeah.
one
No,
of the
I think.
five.
Yeah, I think that's one, and then the second is vocabulary development.
Mm-hmm.
But the technology that is around today compared to when I taught my kids how to read are books on tape, audio books,
Bingo.
right?
Yep.
Oh my God, yeah,
Yep.
that's a huge game changer,
That's right.
and
And you can get
especially if you have an English language learner,
yep.
awesome
We're
books
gonna
on tape.
we're gonna come back to that. And the
All right,
library, by the way, gives out free books on tape, free recorded books. So
nice.
that is a tremendous benefit.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
you had a couple other.
So write a few more
Yep.
connected with vocabulary development, and this comes out of the research of a guy named Bob Marzano,
Mm-hmm.
and Bob has done a lot of work with low income families, and he's noticed that there are two uh, uh, disconnects, usually in low income families. One is lack of vocabulary development,
Mm-hmm.
but also it is lack of building of background knowledge.
Oh, right.
So it's not necessarily reading the same stuff all the time. So you need to expose your young reader to a lot of different types of books that will afford them some background knowledge, right?
Yeah.
So a big difference between middle class kids and low income kids is the middle class kids get to go to the museums, they get to go on vacations, and Marzano found that even though low income kids might not be able to go to the museum, they might not be able to go on vacation to Washington, D.C. Again, the internet provides wonderful, wonderful experiences
Yeah.
to allow kids to build their background knowledge. And that it's really that building of background knowledge that hand in hand goes with strong vocabulary development.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That makes sense, right?
Oh, it makes perfect sense, and that is
Yeah.
again a place where if there are not books in the house, if the family does not prioritize reading, it makes it harder for that child to build some of those that background knowledge, or if the
Yeah.
family is not using the internet as a learning tool to
Yeah.
learn about other cultures, to learn about what's going on in other parts of the United States, then yes, they miss out on additional vocabulary. That's a
Yeah.
huge deal.
So, and then the last two is pretty much when you start talking about reading, you think of practice and you think of comprehension.
Mm-hmm.
And so, reading practice is basically breaking down texts into, paragraphs to sentences.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There are some protocols that you can use, text based conversations that you can use. We can make all of that available to you as a parent if you want to kind of play around with that as you work on your kids' reading capabilities. And then, really, the test of all tests is: are you understanding what you're reading, and beyond understanding, are you able to synthesize? Are you able to break down? There are a number of tasks that good readers have that we want all of our fans readers to have in their toolbox.
That's right. And there's, again, having worked with a lot of families, there's a ton of examples of kids who can read the words and they can read the entire paragraph almost flawlessly. And you ask them what just took place and they have zero idea. So all they're doing is
Yeah,
just parroting whatever it is they're seeing. So,
yeah,
Scott, so let me just review the 5 points. So, there's first is the phonics versus whole language, right? And it's both. It's not a versus, it's a both, right?
that's right.
The second is building a vocabulary. You gave some examples of how to do that earlier in the show. The third is background knowledge by getting a broader understanding of what's going on in society and the world so kids can have anchors for some of these words and things that they're reading, right? And then the
Yeah,
fourth and fifth are practice, and that is just how you want to get better at anything, you got to practice. And then
yeah.
comprehension, and that's the evaluation part to make sure that the child is learning.
Yeah, what's that old adage? Practice makes perfect,
That's right. That's right.
right?
I hated that.
So if
Yeah, I hated that. Now,
well,
Scott.
Matt, the way I know it, you're pretty good without practice at many skills.
Oh, I practice more than most people realize. But listen, here's something I want to also bring to parents. So, what Scott talked about in all of these elements, there are a couple of online programs that I've used with my kids that actually do everything that Scott just described, and they make it automated. So, particularly for families who have language deficits or they're not great readers themselves, that doesn't stop you from making sure your child can become a great reader. One of the programs is called Reading A to Z, and or RAZ, and a lot of schools actually have this available for their families for free, but the families don't use it. Right? So
Wow.
this is like this gold of, okay, son or daughter, hey, it's Saturday and we're gonna We're going to read one of these. We'll read it together as a family. We'll read it out loud, whatever it may be. But we are going to read. So you don't have to have books in your home. You don't have to know how to read even. But you can have access to these systems that then, and at the end of the program, or of these books, Scott, there's a questionnaire for the child to answer the questions. And if the child is reading the book and they don't understand the questions, then you have to reduce you drop the level of difficulty. So now the
Mm.
child is able to read at their appropriate level. It's a fantastic resource that most families don't even realize is out there.
Reading A to Z.
Reading A to Z.
Yeah.
Yep,
Hmm.
it's a
Hmm.
scholastic online reading
Nice.
program. It's
Hey,
fantastic.
Matt, before we get out of here, I want to talk to parents just real quickly about um, how do you design some of this work,
Hmm.
right? So we've talked about outcomes, but there are a couple of other important points that are connected with the desired outcomes. So first, you're going to, as we talked in the program earlier, you're going to identify some summative outcomes.
Yes.
This is what you want to see in the end. But then you're going to break down those outcomes into what we call formative outcomes. So, if you've got like a week or a 2 week project, let's break that down into maybe 2 or 3 days of, what is it going to look like?
Hmm.
So after you've done that, then you'd want to ask yourself, what is some acceptable evidence, right? What do I need to see myself that suggests that my young learner is doing, whether it be phonemic awareness, whether it be building vocabulary, whatever the task is, what's some acceptable evidence, right? And then once you think about what that acceptable evidence is, then you're going to plan some learning experiences, right? So, what are the activities that you and your son or you and your daughter are going to engage in so that you can see the evidence so that you can reach the desired results?
Right. Right.
Now, in the education business, this is called understanding by design.
Hmm.
And parents, if you want to learn more about that, just go to the internet and type in understanding by design, and there's a ton of information
Yeah. Yeah.
to help you with those skills.
Awesome. Understanding by design. Excellent.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so we could go on and on about reading and the importance, but I guess we should probably end this segment, and then parents, we'd like to hear from you. And you can either contact us through our website, Scott at the education game, all one word, .com, or Matt at the education game, all one word.com. Do you have the phone number?
Sure. 832-210-1200 extension 1200. 832-210-1200 extension 1200. Leave us a message.
Well, Matt and I want to personally thank all of you for taking the time to listen to the show today. The education game exists to build a world in which parents and their families reclaim and lead their children to become self directed learners. In our experience, this type of learning does not happen by accident. It requires intentionality, support, and lots of encouragement. Matt and I would like to help you on this journey and are building an online course to help you navigate this new world. In fact, that course we're taking through some parents and families as we make this podcast.
That's right.
Um, if you're interested in learning more, like we said, sign up by going to our website or give us a call. Anything else, Matt, before we shut it down?
Guys, get on that sit time. And again, sit, SIT time. Just making sure. It's a family show, Scott.
Absolutely, absolutely. This has been the education game. He's Matt, aka,
The Brown
how did you
Hornet.
say, the Brown Hornet.
That's pretty good. We'll keep working on it.
And I'm Dr. Scott. Everybody have a good day, good week, and we'll talk soon.